And welcome. The meeting of the Merrimack School Board is hereby called to order this Monday, the 5th of February, 2007. Would everyone please rise and join the board in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. At this time, I will entertain a motion for the approval of the minutes dated January 16th, 2007. So made by Jennifer, second by Jody. Are there any corrections or clarification to said minutes? George?
Page 15, last sentences, I believe it's supposed to be board. Member Thornton.
Yes, rather than board.
And then page 16, I believe it was the intent of the sentence would be the liaisons ask the right questions.
Where are you, George?
Page 16, bottom, last sentence.
Yes, add the article the. Are there further corrections, clarifications, additions, or deletions? Jody?
Page 7, the last paragraph on the bottom, when we halfway through the paragraph, she also mentioned equity issues between athletics and co-curricular groups, particularly band. I would just like the minutes to reflect the clarification that I presented that night at the meeting, that band is not a co-curricular activity, it's an academic program.
Okay.
And I had one typo. Bear with me.
Sure.
On the last page, 18, the first paragraph, the last sentence, she also reported that the T is missing from the program. Thank you.
Okay. Further correction, comment, clarification to said minutes? Seeing none, we'll move the minutes forward as amended for a vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes of January 16th as amended, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. At this point, too, we'd like to also welcome to the table Ms. Laura Gianelli. She is conducting our minutes for us now. She is an employee of the district at Mastercola Elementary School, so some of our children will recognize her from the building, and she is a great asset for us. She's going to be a great help to support the district, so welcome, Laura. At this point in our agenda, we will open up the meeting to public participation. This is an opportunity for members of the public to raise issues, provide information, or state personal positions for the record. We ask that when approaching the microphone, you state your name, address, and any group you represent while adhering to the written guidelines that appear on the back of tonight's agenda. Julie, if you toggle the mic up.
My name is Julie Mitchell.
Yes.
22 Forbes Road, and I currently have 3 kids in the school system, age 5, 12, and 16, so I'm going to be here for a while. I want to speak on the athletic participation fee. And as I was getting prepared for this, I realized that it was a year ago, January 6th, that we were up here presenting to this school board. I think Jody is the newest person on the school board, and David Denton was in place at that time. But I was presenting things on the school team last year, and I presented
If you would just provide them through the table here, we'll.
There's only 7 copies.
Marge, if you would take the one and we'll distribute the rest to the board.
The first thing that I would like to address is the number of schools that are in the NH and Utah AA school system. Currently, there's 91 schools that are listed on the website. And out of those 91 schools, there's various resources out there to try to figure out how many of those schools are actually using user fees. Now, there's no one resource to be able to find out the information.
Thank you. Is there any further public participation? Seeing none, we'll close public participation at this time. Next on our agenda this evening is the approval of the consent agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted, please? So made by Rose, second by Jennifer. On the consent agenda this evening is approval of updated and new policies. We have 3 that have gone through the first reading, through their second approval date, and now appear on the consent agenda. They are the change of school or assignment policy, the manifest educational hardship policy, the age of entrance policy. Is there any discussion by the board on any of the items before you? Seeing none, we'll put the consent agenda to a vote. All those in favor so signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries 5-0-0. The 5th item on our agenda this evening is a proposal for administration of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. We'll be joined at the table this evening by the Drug Advisory Council members. We welcome Terry Bernhardt, Bev Doolin, Rick Walker, Representative Pete Batula, and Assistant Principal Rich Zampieri to the table this evening. Rich, would you shut that microphone off? Thank you so much.
Thank you and good evening.
Welcome.
We appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you guys through the Drug Advisory Council. Bev and I have been members of the council since its inception, and don't ask me what that year was, but it was probably 97 and 98. Mrs. Chaffrey was then in charge of the program. We had initially done in the year 2000 a survey for the teens and the elementary 7th and 8th grades to get a handle on a database for how the community interacted or what their behavior patterns were as far as drugs, alcohol, tobacco, sexual activities, etc. That survey was completed and disseminated to the community probably the following year of 2000. The survey was completed probably in 98 or 99 and disseminated to the public in 2000. We did go to 3 different locations in town to meet with the community members to explain to them what the survey results were and what kind of impact we thought they would have on the community. And as a result of that, a number of benefits came to not only the school district, but to the community at large. I'm not going to sit here and go through what the individual accomplishments were, but they ranged from benefits for funding from the federal government to the enhancement of the community with a teen center activity, and then also for use in the schools to advise how to deal with drug issues or delinquent parent situations. I'm sure Mr. Walker could expound upon that if we ask him to. What we need now is to update this data with another survey. The survey that we used, it was called the TAP survey, is no longer an active entity through the State of New Hampshire Educational Department, but they have a replacement survey which would have a few additional areas of information dissemination regarding nutrition and dieting and physical exercise, which would fall into the school district's plan and wellness programs that they have in effect, and would enhance the additional information for those programs, as well as update the use of drugs, tobacco, and alcohol by the student body and behavior patterns that they bring with them from their respective homes. So we're asking the district, you folks, the school board, to support and endorse the use of scheduled school time for an additional survey. It would be 45 minutes in length, basically, And as far as the implementation of how it would be, I'm going to leave that obviously to the school administration people, but it seems to be pretty straightforward. They'll pick a specific time, and the ones that choose to be participants in the survey will participate, and the ones that don't choose to be in the survey will have the opportunity to opt out. At this point, I would ask any additional information from my distinguished panel to my right, or take any questions from the board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Is there any further comment from the members of the panel? Representative Petula?
Thank you very much. I'm not here to speak in favor of or against the survey that's going to be presented to you. I can tell you that we are dealing nationally with a lot of troubled youth, and if this in any way helps in that situation, it'll be most helpful. I'm spending a lot of time working with the Attorney General and the U.S. Attorney on methamphetamines and other drugs that are really inundating the country, and those are now moving into the Northeast in a pretty hectic manner. And we've been privileged to be out of that loop for the last couple of years. So we are making progress, and my only point is if this survey does some good, I can't see where it would do any harm. The only thing I would ask you to look closely at is any confidentiality questions on the survey to the children. So with that, I'll just leave it to the rest of the members.
Bev?
I just wanted to add that back when we did the original TAP survey, as we discussed the other night at the Drug Advisory Council, it's important to remember it was always part of the original plan that we would resurvey, and that this is really just a continuation of the same project to kind of let us see where we are today, what are the issues, what has changed, where have we been successful, where things are better today, where do we have new challenges, things that maybe didn't even exist, challenge areas for teens back in 2000. That's a lot of years ago in the teen world. So this survey really just would bring us up to date and let us know where we stand.
Debbie?
Another piece about this survey is that the Youth Council is willing to give us a grant so that we could actually have all of our students 9 through 12 take part in the survey. And the good part about that is, I know the board often asks what kind of feedback we'll get. We will get specific information that's tailored to Merrimack. It will give us a picture of exactly what's going on with our teenagers. I'm very eager to have that information because I'm sure you've heard there is dropout legislation pending that will raise the dropout rate perhaps to age 18. And if our district is to have programs for those children, we really need to know what some of their issues are that are causing the dropout problem. Having this information will be very helpful. The other piece about this survey that I'm very interested in is there's quite a bit of information there about diet, nutrition, physical activity that, as Terry said, fits in well with our district wellness plan. I can speak about the good the TAP survey has done because that is how we have received some federal funding that has brought to us programs such as the Youth Council at-risk counselor who's at the high school now 2 days a week and actually has more students waiting for her services than we can fund, as well as the YES program. It's through Title IV Safe and Drug-Free Money, and I have to talk about survey of students, what our needs are in order to get that money. So the up-to-date information will be very helpful.
Okay, is there further comment from the panel? Questions by the board? Jennifer?
Not necessarily a question, but I sit on the drug committee, the drug and alcohol committee, and we spent quite a bit of time taking a look at the actual survey, and I personally think that this would be time well spent on behalf of the children in the district, that we can get some valuable information from them based on the survey results, and the fact that we could actually get the results and using those grant funds so that it doesn't cost the district any money at all is a huge, that's just a huge plus. So.
Okay. Questions from the board? Jody?
Hi, good evening. I have two questions. First, I would like to know, and maybe this is just something we don't have an answer for now, but we need to consider. I just wonder what would happen to the students that families opt out of participating in this survey, is my first question. What would happen to those students during the period while the other students are taking the test, the survey?
We designed the schedule so that the cafeteria would be free and the little theater would be free. So we have plenty of room in the school to place a student safely and comfortably for those that do opt out.
And my second question was the wording on the parental permission form. I didn't know how locked into this wording we were. I just took a look at it and something caught my eye, and I'm not sure that I have necessarily a better way to word it, but it's the second paragraph that says, doing this paper and pencil survey will cause little or no risk to your child. That sentence bothers me. I don't think it gets the message across. I think I understand what's intended by this sentence, but I think it might cause some unnecessary anxiety on the part of the parent, saying what kind of a risk would it cause. And then I saw on the actual, where was it, the survey, the parental permission form for the youth risk behavior, it went on basically to explain what they saw as the potential risk, and that some students might find certain questions to be sensitive. So I just thought if we could possibly do a little bit better job with the wording on that.
Jody, do you have any suggestions for the advisory council?
I wouldn't necessarily say that the survey would cause risk for a child. I don't think that's accurate. I would just say, I might say something like, please know that this survey contains sensitive information that might be upsetting to some children, something along those lines. I think that might be a more appropriate wording for that, because some children are more sensitive to these topics than others. Thank you.
Okay. And on the other one, Jody, was there?
It was the same for, yes.
Okay.
Right, and I mean, the first time when I read that first page, it really stuck out at me, and I wasn't positive what the intention was. And then when I went on to to this form, where it went on a little bit in more detail about what they saw the risk being, then it made sense to me what they were implying by that sentence, but I thought it needed a little more work.
Okay. Would you like the council to take that under advisement?
Please.
Marge, would you? Thank you. Okay, further questions or comments? George and then Rose.
My only question would be the length of time, 45 minutes to take the survey. How much, I mean, that's going to take away a significant amount of time from the day. What was the intention during a study hall for this to take place, or during actual class time?
Mr. Sampieri?
We considered several options and tried to take that into consideration of lost class time. And to maximize the number of students eligible to take the survey, as well as not to lose or lose as little class time as possible, we designed a schedule that essentially made a 9-period day instead of a current 8-period day, so that there would be one extended homeroom, so everyone would have a designated place to go and make it easier to collect the surveys when it was done. And we designed that by taking approximately 8 minutes out of a 45-minute current period, so each class would be 37 minutes, and that would allow for 64 minutes to take the exam, 45 to 50 minutes, and then processing, collecting, and also as well as making sure that everyone knew exactly how to proceed, fill in the right dots, etc.
So each class will be shortened?
Each class would be shortened, but everyone would still attend every class that they were scheduled for that day. Instead of doing it on a block day where there may be extended activities, labs, etc., we didn't want to take that risk and lose a block.
Thank you.
Rose?
I have two things to ask you about. The first one is, what is the way that the parental form, will that be just sent home with the students to be given to the parents to sign? And the other part is, can it also be made available through the Power School emailing, possibly if the parents, don't always get the forms that the kids bring home?
At this point, we had not determined exactly how we were going to roll out the permission form. I suppose we were waiting to make sure that it was supported before we got to that point.
And I guess the other question that goes with that would be also, will this be made like an article in the paper about it, that it's upcoming, so parents can actually know to be looking for the form and the information? Just a suggestion, so that they'll be watching for the form when it comes out.
Within the bounds of trying to roll this out quickly, I hope that we had hoped to have it by March, I believe. We would use every resource available to make sure we could reach, like anything, as many people as possible.
And I have another comment. Okay. The last time that this survey was done, I was actually involved in PERC at the time that we looked at the results, and I was also involved in some of the parent group activities and that looked at this, that moved forward with the teen center activities that I think were definitely a step in the right direction for Merrimack youth. And I think that this is a good thing, and I think that we're going to get a lot of good behavior from a lot of good information about behavior that goes on. And then the tie-in to it is I just received a certificate for a conference that I attended with some of the other administrators and staff at the high school, and it was about dropout prevention and recovery conference. And so I think anything that we can do proactive before we're handed yet another unfunded mandate, that I think it's a smart way to be proactive and to be looking at the big picture, is to take, and especially when we have already secured grant funding for it. I will completely support this.
Further comment, questions from the board? George?
One last thing I thought of. I remember reading an article. New Hampshire was #1 in the use of marijuana under the age of 18. Does anyone know if that statistic is correct or if it's still accurate?
If I could, I think that is an accurate information. How true it is, I don't know.
Okay.
But it has been
I have
printed.
read that, and some of it was to be blamed on. I think the intent of the article was that legislation, or I can't remember how it was worded correctly, but it had to do with kind of a repressive, or I'm trying to think of the spirit of the article. It had to do with a repressive legislation or restrictive laws in New Hampshire, whereas some of the article was blaming that restrictive legislation actually caused more of a tendency for younger people to want to rebel against that enforcement of that law. Therefore, we're more likely to try the drug as to kind of rebel against the system, I guess.
I've read that also, and another thing that I'm hearing more of is the money in New Hampshire is greater than the surrounding areas. So that has a lot to do with the money being available to buy the drugs. How true any of this is just somebody's conjecture.
Well, I'm sure there's statistics about nationwide use through police or law enforcement agencies, or even the schools that do these similar surveys that would indicate which states have a higher tendency, if anything.
New Hampshire is in the top 3.
Okay, thank you.
George, I think without having the article in front of us, it becomes really hard for us to deal with, a conversation surrounding it. So.
And I agree, and that's why I figured the panel might, being that they are conducting a drug survey, might have that information readily at hand.
Okay. I'd certainly like to support the survey based on the work that the state has done in this area in the past. In terms of the contributions that it's given to our district, we know that it helps us with Project Safeguard. It works with our DARE programs. It helps our teachers in guiding their instruction and curriculum on many different levels. And I noticed, too, if I can ask one question, our memo stated that Judy Nicholson would be in attendance this evening. Deb?
I did expect her here, and I think Representative Batula did too. I'm not sure why she's not here, but she did plan to attend this evening.
Would it be possible for board members to direct questions through the administration toward her if we have some as this moves toward the consent agenda?
Certainly.
Okay. If that's agreeable to the board this evening, I'd like to move this item as submitted to the consent agenda for our meeting on the 20th of February. Is there any consternation? Student rep? Good idea. Okay. Thank you, Megan. All right. If there's no further discussion or comment, thank you, panel, for coming before us this evening. We'll look forward to your findings. As the table clears, the sixth item on our agenda this evening is a modified energy management proposal and accompanied warrant article. We'll be joined at the table by Jim Lucy and Wally Howe, again from Honeywell, Shirley LeMay, our Director of Maintenance, and Shannon Barnes from the School Planning and Building Committee. To preface their presentation this evening, in the period of time that's ensued since they last presented to the board on the 15th, Mr. Lucy has found that Keyspan has been non-committal in their efforts to work with the district and to discuss the energy conversion from oil heat to natural gas. Since we would like to ascertain that the material that gets presented to our voters is in as full and complete of a context as we can possibly give them, this evening we're going to be speaking with Mr. Lucy and Mr. Howe about what the modified proposal for the voters would look like on our warrant article. Jim, if you think I've done a full enough preface. And that should undo from its mount.
Everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Thank you for your time again, and we'll try to be concise and to the point. I know we visited a couple weeks back and went over a lot of the same information. As the chair said, that the only thing that really has changed here is we have been unable to get a formal commitment from Keyspan to do the natural gas conversion of oil to natural gas or propane to natural gas conversions that we had planned in this building, the Master Cola Complex, the maintenance building, the superintendent's office, and the support services building. And as a result of that, a decision was made to modify the proposal, to pull those items out, and to show you the impact of that change. So that's really the goal of tonight, is to really briefly outline that impact. And Wally, if you could just... In your packet that Wally just handed out is this same slide, and so some of the information may be easier for you to look at in the packet versus looking on screen here as I get to some other slides. I have basically put together a summary of the slides of some of the things that we've looked at previously, and just with a new date on it, just to try to not confuse things from some of the previous information provided. But really, here's a brief outline of the changes. As you can see from the first bullet, as I just mentioned, the primary change here is deleting the natural gas or the oil or propane to natural gas conversions in the buildings outlined. As a result of that, we've pulled the scope of work associated with that to make that natural gas conversion happen. What that meant was the proposal we had initially from Keyspan, which has now been pulled, was they would bring the piping to the building. Once it's to the building, then we would have to do work to make sure that the gas piping was run to the kitchen over here, to the boiler rooms, and so on. In addition to that, we had an initial budget in place to remove the oil tanks that were in the ground, as well as the propane tanks at the other buildings. We were also doing work like changing out the oil burners on the existing boilers in this building to upgrade those for dual fuel capacity down the road. So all of those items have been pulled from the project at this point because they were associated with the conversion, and that's why they were in the price from the get-go. Going next to the list here, we made a decision once we redid our calculations and determined if we did not have natural gas in this building, it no longer made financial sense to convert the existing electric kitchen cooking equipment to new natural gas-fired cooking equipment. So that has also been pulled from the project. And you can see down in the Master Cola complex, as I mentioned just a second ago, you have propane that is used for the kitchen cooking equipment down there. Because we were going to be running natural gas piping to that location, we were going to be converting that from propane to natural gas. That's been pulled from the project. Along with that was the removal of the propane tanks in the Master Cola complex. We added in, we did a lot of deletes, but we did add in because the proposal now will be maintaining oil in the buildings that we're going to get natural gas. We've added in a very consistent energy conservation measure that we've done over the years. It's an oil preheater. Basically, the device goes on to the burner portion of the boiler. It heats up the oil before it gets burned to a more efficient temperature. And where you maintain savings there is to maintain your efficiencies of the boiler burner unit itself that are at its peak once it's tuned in the summer period. And you maintain the efficiencies by it burning cleaner, less soot that's being built up inside the boiler vessel itself. Soot acts like an insulating factor. When you have insulation, more heat is going up the stack versus out into the building, what you're paying for. So that's been added in to go on the boilers in the locations noted. I should footnote that in the Master Cola complex, as well as the high school, the preheaters will not be going in the smaller locations, just does not pay. Question? So the net result, and again, this is in your packet if it's hard to see, is when we had the original base proposal of a 10-year self-funded project, we had a total proposal cost of $3,489,988. As a result of removing the natural gas piece from the project, that number is now $3,017,816. The next net impact is on the annual energy savings that we were guaranteeing. We originally had $262,012 from the last proposal. Now, as a result of pulling that, we've lost about $40,000 a year, and we're down to $222,462. That's still well over 20% of your current cost, so it's a pretty big number. And really the integrity, or the main integrity of the project proposal, stays intact. Again, it's really anything associated with converting from oil to natural gas, or propane to natural gas. The other major change that we've added into the scope of work, or the financial cash flow, which I'll go over here shortly, which was just really omitted from the original cash flow, is the way the financing is proposed is you would, similar to you have an escrow fund in your home mortgage, but when we would do the construction work, you would fund the money to pay for the construction into an escrow fund. And throughout the 12 or so month of construction period, you would be earning interest on the money as it sits into escrow. So we've applied that the net interest that you would gain, the district would gain, would be about $54,000. So we've applied that earnings to you, which is the district's money, to the first year payment, which allows you to improve the cash flow from the impact of pulling the natural gas out of the project, and that again is real money that would come directly to the district. So that's one final change that was really the summary of all changes from the proposal that we reviewed with you the other week. You could go to the next slide, Wally. Just hit. Again, this is just a summary. I'll quickly go through this is the same kind of format that we had in the initial proposal, just kind of generalizing the scope of work. Again, the only changes at the bottom here, you'll see preheaters in now. The previous one had the oil to natural gas conversions in there in the various buildings, as well as the kitchen conversion in this site from electric to natural gas. Next slide, please. And this is really just the same look that you had before as far as the scope of work. So the majority of this project is still there. Again, it's removal of the key span proposal. Next. So what I want to do is just quickly go through what changed from a numbers standpoint from the last time I was with you to today. So when we were last here, yes.
Option C I just think maybe we've changed this, made you change this so many times, something got missed. Was the interest cost over a 12-year term or a 10-year term? Was that
12-year, that's
okay.
my mistake.
That's
Thank
what
you,
I thought.
Jody.
That's okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Outside of that error, which is my bad, this was the cost and revenue summary of the project proposal that was last put in front of you that was voted on. And you can see the total construction cost was $4,235,000, and then you can follow down from it the interest over the 12-year term, not 10. And then you can see project revenues was $4.3 million plus building aid, which is 30% of the capital project. That's how that's factored. And then the utility rebate, which is the same in the total savings. And if you could go to the next slide, Wally. This is what it looks like now that's revised. Again, subtracting out the portions of Keyspan that we reviewed in the first slide, this is the impact. So the project cost went from 4,235 down to the little under 3.8 million. Interest over the 12-year term, I got this one right, is about 1,150,000, and then totals up to 4,917,000. And then when we get down in here to the total guaranteed energy cost avoidance is 3,755,052. State building aid, again, 30% of the project cost is 1,130,000. And then utility rebate is the same. And then that totals up to 5,036,651. So still here in the positive, a little over $100,000 over the 12-year term. So that really is, from a financial perspective, the difference from the last proposal to this one as a result of pulling out the proposed natural gas conversion and associated work that went along with that.
Okay. Jim, if I might, I have prepared a handout just to compare the two costs that were associated, and I did pass this through the district administration to make sure that my math was correct. So I thought that this would just be a better visual for the board to help understand what the original proposal looked like in dollars and cents and what it looks like as amended tonight. Marge, can I have one back? And the extras can be given to the table just so they have in hand what I'm speaking from. In the chart that you have before you, all I did was I took the numbers that appeared in the financial overview that was submitted to us on the 23rd when we last met and discussed this. I put those items into the first column, and then as the document that came in our packet, I put that into the second column. The items that I addressed were the first-year cost avoidance. That would be the item that we would need to move to the warrant. And note that the number $214,096 would not include the $54,000 in interest savings that Mr. Lucy just referred to. We still need to raise and appropriate that amount on the warrant article, but we will realize that money to be put right back into the project as principal right away. The total project cost was the second area that I looked at, what overall we would need to be considering as a price tag. Thirdly, the amount to be financed, that would be after we are able to make the down payment and the other items that appear there, like the state building aid and the utility rebates. The interest that we would pay out over the 12-year period of this term. And finally, the cash flow, or really the return on our investment that we would see after the 12 years. By comparison, by removing this one piece about the natural gas conversion or propane from oil, the first-year cost avoidance goes up by $51,000 from the January presentation. But we do need to take into account the $54,000 that would be realized through the interest in financing. Secondly, the project cost goes down over $467,000. We also see the amount to be financed decreasing over $467,000. Thirdly, the amount of interest over the 12-year term decreases over $135,000. And the bottom line, too, in the cash flow that's realized from the energy efficiency over the 12-year period, it does decrease from $220,000 by $100,933. So if that guides your decision-making concerning this proposal as it moves to the warrant, I thought that this might be helpful for you to really see what the dollars and cents are instead of having to flip through different charts or pages. Is there any comment or question to come from the board this evening? Jody?
Thank you, Jim and Wally. I am disappointed that Keyspan hasn't been able to commit to us, but I don't think that in itself should prohibit the board from considering moving forward with this proposal. This proposal is still presenting a substantial cost to the district through energy management. It's still proposing what I consider, and I've spoken before about, I feel is a great value, is responsible energy consumption on the part of the school district. So I support the option C revised, even though we're not going to be able to move forward with the natural gas. I would like to point out to people, because I think sometimes these types of financial situations get confusing, this warrant article regarding the appropriation, this has come forward basically as an effort. This money that we are talking about in this warrant article is money that we are actually going to realize as a savings during the construction period of this project. This is money that is going to come back to the district through energy savings. This money can be put toward the principal to buy down the interest rate, and I feel that that's a very responsible thing for the school district to do from a budgetary standpoint. So as long as, and if anyone doesn't understand that, I ask them to please call a school board member, call administration, make sure that you understand that if there's any confusion. But this is money that we're realizing through savings, and we're using that money to buy down the principal, which will give us a savings on interest. Thank you.
And Shannon and Wally, I didn't ask, and Shirley, I'm sorry, if there was any comment from either of you on the proposal that's submitted this evening. Shannon?
From looking at the numbers, which I actually just got shortly before the meeting, I still think that it aligns some of our goals with the capital improvement plan long term. I think we can definitely still say that the taxpayer will come out ahead with this plan. I think Honeywell even tried to compromise every way they could by finding alternative ways to be more efficient with the structure that we have with oil. So they went back to the table and still found a way of making it better. So not being able to realize all of our goals, I think we're still coming out way ahead. And some of the things that we can just definitely recycle from our last meeting is that things will improve. Quality of lighting in schools, consistency of temperatures, the best possible educational environment at a savings to the taxpayer on utilities. That money was going to the utilities anyway. Instead, it's going to improvements. And I think in the long term, the student wins, the taxpayer wins, and the school district wins. So I definitely think that we can go forward with a lot of confidence that this will be nothing more than a positive.
Thank you, Shannon. Shirley, are you all set? Okay. Further comment or discussion by the board? George?
I'm a bit confused. I'm a lot confused, actually. When we were discussing this plan, you stated that natural gas was the best way to go because not only would there be a much cleaner environment, pollutant-wise, air quality-wise, you also stated that there would be a lot less equipment maintenance because oil-fired burners require more maintenance. I know they have a fuel injection nozzle. They require maintenance annually, whereas natural gas, you could probably go every couple of years, maybe every 2 years, or the maintenance schedule is less with natural gas. Some of that equipment cost for repairs would be less. So I'm not seeing that factored in. Based on what I'm seeing here, I would reject this plan at this time and try and find out if we can renegotiate with Keyspan to get that work done.
I'll let Wally comment on the maintenance end. He can speak more point of fact than I can. We never calculated in this proposal what I would classify, and maybe some of what you were alluding to, operational type savings. Really, those are more of an intangible, how it impacts maintenance. We're talking about really replacing and upgrading all the lights in the district as an example. In Shirley's budget now, she has some level of funding that's required each year to buy new lamps, new ballasts, and do pay for an electrician to upgrade that. So none of those are really calculated in.
Yeah, but let's not talk about lighting, right? Let's stick with the oil conversion to natural gas. When you made your presentation, you were pretty clear in your pitch to us that natural gas was the best way to go from many different angles. Also, the savings from switching to natural gas appliances, cooking appliances, versus using the current electric appliances. I mean, there was many aspects to that plan. It seems almost like what you're presenting now is, hey, we can't do it the way we originally thought, so let's go with this take it or leave it plan.
It's really not meant to be that way. We've been waiting for Keyspan for close to 3 months since we initially contacted them. It's been a much longer delay than I certainly ever expected. And there's been a series of reasons that they've given us that they haven't been able to give us a formal commitment. At that point between our last meeting and this one, we really got further clarification with them that the delay is going to continue. And that information that they gave us around some of the reasons for the delay added to our questioning whether the realities of whether they're going to be able to provide the conversion up to the building is going to be cost effective for you, because there may be additional capital costs that they're going to require to you to do the infrastructure upgrades to even bring the piping to the building. So as a result of that, and in conversations with the administration, we made a decision to see what the project looked like without the gas piece in there. So we do not have conclusive response back from Keyspan that's saying it's a no-go. What we do know from them, it's an unknown how long it's going to take for them to give us that answer. Also have additional doubt whether that response back from some of the reasons that there's been a delay within their existing infrastructure, their capacity to bring gas to these buildings and supply it at a reliable pace will be at no cost to you up to the building. So as a result of that, we've kind of peeled out the gas piece, we've revised the proposal, and we're sharing that with you tonight. We still believe, and that's why it was in the original proposal, that going that route is more beneficial for you. And you could see the savings associated with that. And there are other things that can trickle down from that from an operational standpoint. But at this point in time, knowing that you need to have a little more clarity as you move through the decision-making process, we felt that it was the right thing to do to bring that information to you and let you know what the changes would be. It's not to say in time that they won't come back and give a different answer that will make sense to move forward as originally discussed. But at this point in time, it's a pretty foggy picture.
The other part of the projects could be completed first, though, if this delay were to continue. It's not a no. It's just a delay at this time.
It's not a no. It's more of what I've been hearing for the last close to 3 months, that we don't have an answer for you. It's still in engineering. Then it came back from engineering, and there was apparently they've added some significant industrial organizations in this area on this line that have converted recently to natural gas. It's put a strain on the infrastructure, and they're concerned that they don't have enough sizing in their distribution system to maintain the gas pressure to bring the gas here. So as a result of that, additional evaluations into what it's going to take to bring it up to that point are required. That delay is really unknown how long it's going to take for them to get back to us, and we really don't know, is that answer ultimately going to have additional costs associated than the preliminary proposal they gave us back 2.5 months ago. So we just felt it was the prudent thing to bring that to your attention, let you know the impacts. We still think that it's beneficial to look in that direction. But at this point, we don't know if the numbers are, at the end of the day, are going to boil down to be beneficial or not. That aside, there's still tremendous benefits we feel in the proposal, without the gas being said, from an environmental standpoint, as far as comfort control, from a lighting standpoint, other things associated with the project. And we're still able to, without that, generate close to $250,000 in annual savings, or $225,000 worth of annual savings, which is over 20% of what you spend each year in utilities. And really, as an essence of this proposal and through the audit process, was trying to identify inefficiencies that you're spending to your current utility providers. And the choice now really is, do you continue to spend money to those folks or capture those dollars and reinvest them back into your infrastructure?
No, and I agree, but I mean, I'm seeing a $100,000 difference in the cash flow over the 12-year period. Significant savings from the previous plan are now quite diminished on this new plan.
George, if I can point out, though, it's still a win-win. I mean, we're still realizing over $100,000 in cash flow just for enacting these cost measures. I think the bottom line here is, for our consideration, are we still committed to trying to manage the energy consumption and usage in our district? This is just one aspect, $467,000 of the overall scope of the project. It roughly equates to about 10% of the measures that would be enacted in the district. So really, what it boils down to is, as a board, do we still wish to put forward to the voters a decision for them to enact energy management change? What we could do, George, and I'd suggest, you could at this point make a motion that would authorize the school board and the district administration to revisit the portion of the agreement with Keyspan, should Keyspan come back next week, next month, before the formal agreement is signed, so that that could be a decision that the board and the administration would make jointly. It would not affect the warrant, but would certainly allow the voters to say, yes, we do want energy control and management here in the district.
Well, the only way I would make a motion is if it eliminated that phase of the project and continued with the lighting upgrades and various building sealing and ventilation sealing and repair and upgrades that we're looking at doing.
George, that would be the warrant that's prepared for you this evening. It would eliminate that portion that you just mentioned and talk about the lighting, the sealing of the envelope, the different upgrades to the fixtures dealing with the water and electric, the boilers.
It's not the way I'm reading it. Authorize the school board 12-year lease agreement for purpose of energy efficient building
Wally?
infrastructure. Raise the appropriate sum to $50,000 first payment.
All right. I think the only thing that we're adding to this project that was not in the last project is the oil heaters. The burners are staying the same now. We're not changing those out. In the other project, we will be changing them out to go with gas because they need to be changed out. So we're not touching them now, other than adding the oil heaters. If you're concerned that we're putting something in that might want to be, let's say you might throw away if you decide to go with gas a year from now, then I guess my suggestion would be is don't put in the oil heaters, remove the amount of, I'm shooting myself in the foot, probably stop kicking me, Jim, but remove the oil heaters from the project, and then if a year from now you decide and Keyspan comes around with a good proposal for you that you want to go with natural gas in your buildings like we had in our first proposal, you wouldn't be throwing anything out the window, let's say, like the price of the oil heaters.
That was my concern, that we would buy the
that would be the
new
only
equipment,
thing.
and then all of a sudden gas is readily available, and we're stuck with multiple thousands of dollars worth of equipment that is now not needed.
But that would be the only thing that we're really added back into the project that was not in there before, that you wouldn't use a year from now if you changed and went over to gas, to natural gas. Otherwise than that, we're not touching your kitchen, so you could go to natural gas in the kitchen later on. We're not touching the other kitchen at the Master Cola Complex by changing over from propane to gas. We are putting in domestic hot water tanks that would be run on propane, but nozzle change on those is simple, and it's very little cost to change from propane to natural gas once they're in. So you really wouldn't be throwing anything away other than the oil heaters a year from now if you decided you wanted to go with natural gas, if they come up with a good proposal for you.
Jody, and then Shannon.
I had a question about the oil heaters. Are they a very expensive, costly item, or possibly even if we just had them for a year or two, would the energy savings make up for it, the purchase of those, or are they?
Not in that short of a period of time.
It sounds to me too like Keyspan could possibly come forward, but if they're worried about infrastructure, that could be something that might affect their ability to come forward for quite some time. I'm hesitant to hold off on an energy management proposal, knowing that it could possibly take what could possibly be years for Keyspan to come forward with natural gas to our schools. I also want to speak to George's comment regarding the less savings made available every year. Yes, that is a fact. However, if we don't move forward with this project, there will be zero savings every year, and we're just going to continue to give the money to the utilities that we could be spending on improvements. So yes, we won't realize as great a savings as we were hoping, but if we don't move forward, we won't realize any savings, and we'll be consuming energy at a rate that we don't need to. It's not necessary.
Thank you. Shannon? And then Jim, thanks.
The one thing we did discuss before the meeting was we'd be looking at about 5% savings in oil consumption per year, per season. So that would be realized from the first year we had to turn on the burners using the oil preheaters. We did not discuss specifically, unfortunately, how much an oil preheater costs per unit. And as you're saying, it would take at least 2 years, would you say, Jim, to realize the break-even point? Is that fair? Without knowing the futures of oil, of course.
I would say more towards 4 or 5 years before.
4 to 5 years?
The payback, yeah.
And obviously, I think something we discussed in our subcommittee meetings as well was that the futures of any fuel are hard to really grasp. So, although there are many benefits of having that natural gas, if it's not realized, still realizing that 5% savings in oil could pay itself and maybe even cost out against gas on the long term, not knowing the market, being as it's been as volatile as it has. So I don't think we lose on this saving 5% per season. I think there's definitely still a win in having the oil preheaters in the plan.
Jim, did you wish to
I was
comment?
just going to say that the area of the Keyspan conversation that made me the most nervous is part of the delay was they indicated because of the capacity issue in their existing system that they needed to now go to the state because they'd have to tie into a main around the Everett Turnpike. So now you're getting into some major, to me, issues that dealing with the state and then tying into through the turnpike. Who knows what kind of cost that would be and who knows how long it would take. And that was really some of the information that added to the concern of how long could this take and then what kind of ultimate impact could that have to be as far as the proposal. But there really is no clear yes or no from them at this point in time.
Okay. Wally?
The other thing is, if you do put the oil heaters on and you run them for 2 years, you're getting savings for that 2 years. The other thing is, I believe it was a toss-up, whether he was going to remove the oil tanks completely, go with just natural gas, or did he want to stay with the option of being able to go back and forth with oil and gas. If we left that as the option, which we could go either way, so you'd have a dual fuel capabilities, the oil heaters would still be there to be used when you used oil. So you wouldn't be, if you run 2 years with the oil heaters and then you run a couple of years without the oil heaters, you decide you wanted to use oil again, you would have the oil heaters there that would give you that savings when you did use it. When they're just sitting there, they won't cost you anything to run because they only run when the burner runs for oil, but they will be there for the savings if you do use oil. So.
Further questions from the board? Jennifer?
I have a few questions. I just want to understand correctly, and I'm sure the public would be interested too, is why does it have to be Keyspan? Is there is no other natural gas carrier in New Hampshire? Are they the only?
Similar to public service, they are the gas supplier, if you will, for this area. I live in Portsmouth. We deal with Northern Utilities, so you're stuck with that on the distribution end. But as we talked about before, there's 4 or 5 licensed suppliers in New Hampshire that you could buy and compete the gas supply piece. So you have to deal with Keyspan on the distribution system, the piping, how they get the gas to the building,
So to tie into
the commodity
lines.
piece you can shop.
Okay, all right. And to that same, they made a proposal and then indicated that they can't follow through with that proposal. Am I following
Well,
what happened?
Basically what happened is, and we've footnoted this in I think the majority of our discussions with you folks, and it came up, I know, at the last meeting, is that was really the only piece we didn't have nailed right down. They initially gave us preliminary proposal that this probably would be something that would make financial sense, where meaning that they had enough capacity in their system to bring the gas piping up to the building, and then we took over from there of determining what's the cost to get everything connected. Based upon that and the economics of the conversion, we made a determination it made sense. We always have been waiting, really since the last 2.5 months, back into mid-November really, from that preliminary proposal of what the final conclusion would be. And between the last meeting and this meeting, we had additional conversations with them, and it's still an unknown. They had that response back around, gee, we got to go to the next step now. We got to go to the state. We got to find out how much more work is entailed here. And at that point in time, just felt it was the prudent thing is to bring this to the administration's attention, spend the time, additional time on our end of pulling that piece out of the project, determining what's the impact, and here we are this evening.
If they did come through, and Matt, this may be a question more for you, if Keyspan did come through to follow through with that initial proposal, is that something that would go into another warrant article in the future, or could it be rolled into the realized savings of the project?
Well, if you look at the warrant article, we're really only raising a first year's payment and naming the term. It doesn't get specific as far as what the energy source is, be it oil or natural gas. So that's something that perhaps if it does come within the year and it is viable, that's something we would probably bring back to the school board, have them take a look at it, have them take a look at a revised proposal, and we could, with your permission, with your vote, go forward with the gas proposal at that time, if the oil heaters weren't in place, if it wasn't too far into the process.
Right, okay. And I wanted to ask about this because it caught my attention and I wasn't sure if it was nailed down or not. But Jody, you mentioned paying down on principal on the savings that we realized. Is that, I think that was something that was undetermined at the last presentation. Was that ever discovered?
I think Board Member Markwell asked the question if we could pay down the principal. I don't recall if we had gotten an answer yet.
Yeah.
That was something that, from past experience, and I can't speak for the finance community, that it's a negotiating point between attorneys when you get to the contract.
I didn't
but
know
it's
if
something
I
that
missed
really,
something.
yeah, it needs to be addressed up front with them.
Okay, all right. And then I had another question on the cash flow from option A versus the revised C option. The sheet that we were looking at from the original presentation on option A, is that cash flow also recognizing savings from the Keyspan proposal?
Yes,
Okay.
all right.
I just wanted to make sure that I was comparing
and that's,
apples and
But
oranges
Jennifer,
at this point.
that option is removed from the table after we decided on option C.
Just checking.
up until this point, everything we've provided you for information has included that. This is the first meeting that we've pulled that portion out to show you the impact of what the proposal would be, cost and savings-wise, without it.
And then, is it possible to get a dollar amount from you, and obviously not tonight, but can we get an amount for those preheaters, those oil preheaters?
Yes.
To see if that's an option, maybe to pull that
Absolutely.
dollar amount out of that? And would that change anything that goes onto the warrant article if those were pulled out?
The only thing I would say is that the preheaters is one of the items that has a pretty good payback now that the proposal is to stay with oil. So it probably would impact that bottom line cash flow a little bit because the payback is certainly self-pays much faster than the 12 years that this proposal's on. So if any impact, with the assumption that those stay and you stay with oil, it'll have a negative impact on the bottom line cash flow.
How much in the negative?
We'd have to make that determination. I can get you that information.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if it would be a substantial impact or if it's slight.
It's not. We'd have to make the. I honestly don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Further comment or question from the board? Seeing that the range of questions that have come from both board members Markwell and Thornton have dealt with the what ifs, with the retaining of the oil heat and provision of the preheaters to the system, or what if Keyspan does come out, I would like to make the formal motion so that we recognize that we would give the authority to the school board and the district administration to come back and revisit the portion of this contract that deals with the Keyspan energy component of the plan as it works with the district. And to entertain any offers from the company, Keyspan, prior to signing a formal commitment with Honeywell, with the understanding that this commitment would ensure further savings or benefit for the district. Could I have a motion or a second to the motion? Seconded by Jody. As I just spoke to or alluded to, I think that one of the things that I would like to ensure is that the board works with the district administration before the contract is enacted to make sure that we are analyzing that there is still benefit to this. But at this time, we need to be able to move or be discussing moving the warrant article as submitted tonight forward to the voters. It does need to go through the Budget Committee on the 13th and to the public hearing at that time. So if there is any further, is there any further discussion or comment to the motion that's on the table? Rose?
I certainly think the motion that's just been proposed gives me, makes me feel secure that if something were to come, we've actually decided, hopefully we will decide that we have the option to discuss this and reconsider it should it come in a timely fashion. And I certainly think some of the, some good questions have been raised, like, how much savings will we realize from the preheating oil burners, to consider those things. And this will just give us a tool that will ensure that we have all the powers that we need to have to be able to take the information and make a determination with it. So I'll support this motion.
Further comment, discussion? Jennifer?
Just thought of another question that I wanted to ask, which was regarding the $54,000 that was going to be returned in the first year. Where did that come from that it's new, that was not in the original proposal?
It's simply something I had omitted from the original one, and in putting the revision together, included that, which was money that was coming to you one way or another, just part of the way the financing was set up. So it was added to that initial payment to try to more aggressively kind of buy down the schedule over the term of the agreement.
Is there any further discussion or question on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, the motion is submitted authorizes the school board and the district administration to revisit the portion of the proposal dealing with the Keyspan's ability to work with the district and to entertain offers from the company prior to signing a formal contract or agreement with Honeywell, with the understanding that a commitment from Keyspan would result in additional savings to the district. All those in favor of the motion as submitted, so signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposition, abstention, student rep's position. In favor, motion carries 5-0-0. Student rep recorded in favor. If I might return to the original documentation at this time, too. Jim, one of the things that caught my eye is that the utility rebate for the first year, fiscal year 07-08, is $151,254. That dollar amount is the exact same from the original proposal, and we see under footnote 3 that the utility rebate is estimated and subject to approval by Keyspan and PSNH. With the removal of the conversion to natural gas, how can we be assured of having $151,000 and change returned in the utility rebate?
It's a good question. We have never, there's kind of two forms of rebates that Keyspan makes available to its customers. One is under the proposed conversion piece. The other is when we can reduce consumption in existing buildings with natural gas. You have two locations that currently have natural gas now. So that notation there, and part of that was the term figuring reduction in buildings with natural gas now and how you can get a nominal rebate in the form of that. So we'd never really calculated the rebate, which was unknown as part of their proposal of the conversion of what that would be, and it was never part of that notation. So the answer to your question is we're comfortable with the $151,254, so much we're willing to kind of assure you that will be there for you. We'll take the risk on that rebate amount, if you will. So.
Okay, thank you. Is there further question or clarification needed by the board? Seeing none, the warrant article as modified appears before you this evening. I will entertain a motion to approve the energy efficiency improvement warrant article, a special warrant article that reads, shall the district vote to authorize the school board to enter into a 12-year lease agreement for the purpose of energy efficiency and building infrastructure upgrades to district facilities, and to raise and appropriate the sum of $214,062 for the first year's payment for that purpose. This lease agreement contains an escape clause. The majority vote is required. Could I have a motion for the warrant article as submitted?
Just a question. 214.62, 214.096. Difference between the two amounts on your chart, Emily? Is that just a typo or?
Matt?
Does that include the 54? Is that what it is?
It doesn't.
The number that we have in here should be the number that's on the warrant article, okay? So it needs to be changed.
So the warrant article 214.062 is not correct? It's 214.096?
What I'm hearing, George, is that the item, the document that was submitted to us in our school board packet is prior to a revision that's included in the booklet that was provided by Honeywell this evening,
Should be 096.
so that the dollar amount that appears on the modified warrant article is correct. That was a good catch.
And this amount includes $54,000 of interest money that we're going to accrue?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask, just to make sure I understand completely. The $254,000 includes $54,000 from interest. It's kind of like we write you a check for $214, you write us a check for $54.
Yeah, it's really independent of us. It's more you're borrowing the money from the bank, if you will, and making the payment, and then at the end of that term, those earnings are not the bank's, it's your money. And so you're using that $54,000 to really be part of that first year payment. The balance of that is made up of the guaranteed energy savings, $160,000 roughly, that we guarantee would occur during the construction phase of the project.
So in that case, if I could just kind of clarify a little bit, we would write you a check for $214,000. At the end of the year, there'd be $54,000 of interest that we'd take and just let it flow into the general fund as surplus then.
So that is why the original amount was $162,362 on the warrant for our first payment is now going to be more money? I'm not following. I guess I'm lost. Why are we paying more when we're cutting stuff out?
That amount went up because in that original one, the interest earned during that construction phase in escrow was not factored into that. When the revisions were made, those earnings, those real dollars were accounted for and then added to the additional payment amount as a way to start paying on the project sooner, more sooner, which ultimately reduces your interest over the term. So the 214 is the sum of the energy savings in the construction phase plus the escrow earnings during the construction phase as well.
Okay, so we're in essence, you're paying a larger amount for the first payment, some of that going towards principal.
Correct.
To further reduce the
Absolutely.
principal balance.
Yep.
But we still don't, there's still an unknown as to whether or not the finance company will allow for earlier payments?
I know that it's allowed for, it's just a matter of, negotiating those terms out. I will say that I think it's relatively standard terms that there is some form of a prepayment in there. I do know that those can be negotiated.
And you're still confident, though, we're not using, as you had said before, we're not using Keyspan at this time?
No.
The 154, 254, which is a utility rebate based on the fact that you're switching over to a natural gas appliance. I'm still kind of confused how you're going to be able to offer that if we're not using the natural gas appliances.
You have natural gas currently in the middle school and Thornton's Ferry. And every therm of gas that we can reduce through the core proposal, they pay you 75 cents a therm. And a therm is just like a gallon of oil. It's the same kind of measurement. So there's a nominal amount that you'll be able to get for an incentive for Keyspan on the demand side kind of incentive program. The other one, which was part of the conversion, is another incentive pool they have that incentivizes customers to convert from oil, propane to gas. And that was an incentive we never calculated in just because we had no finalization of their numbers back to us. So we were being conservative at that point and not calculating that in.
So this number does not reflect that conversion?
It does not, never did. And we're comfortable enough with the 151 where we would be willing to accept the risk of that rebate being there for you. And if there is a difference, then we would accept the risk and the cost of the job.
So, and if Keyspan gets their act together, and we do convert this building, for example, this amount could actually change, is
It
what
could.
you're saying?
It could.
It would go up in the positive side for us?
If they came back with a proposal that actually had incentives that were to the positive, yes, it would.
Because normally they'll provide some of the appliances too, won't they? As far as the burners themselves?
No, not that we're aware of in this program. I know they have various programs on the residential commercial end. I think, I know it's not Keyspan, but locally there's some conversion on the residential end, but we're not familiar with any of that would impact this project. So.
Okay, so potentially this amount could go up further if we do come through and get the connection.
And I would stress potential. Yeah, the vast majority of that is public service.
Okay. Thank you.
All set? Jennifer?
I just have a quick question because I think it would help on the warrant article for the voters to see that 54,000 would be coming back in the first year. Is there a way to word that in the warrant?
Jennifer, I think if you remember, Matt worked with the Department of Revenue's administration and their guidelines for crafting the warrant articles such as this.
Yes.
Matt, was there any provision to that effect?
No, this is really kind of boilerplate right from DRA. I just took their wording exactly.
Yeah.
So.
I just thought it would help. It would help people to see that there would be the surplus coming back, and could affect that number.
Yeah. Again, if I could add, that would be something we could do in the voters' guide that we pass out every year, and we could also show the payments over the 12 years in the total, because right now you don't really get a sense of the magnitude of it.
Right. All right.
That's a good idea. Jennifer, would you like to see that appearing in the voter's guide to have that sort of clarification? That's a good idea.
I was just going to note that really technically all of that's coming back because it's coming back in the form of that and plus the reduced energy impact.
Okay. At this time, I will again entertain a motion to approve the modified warrant article for energy efficiency improvement. Could I have a motion? Made by George, a second by Jennifer. All those in favor of approving the modified warrant article on energy efficiency improvement as submitted this evening, so signify by saying aye. Aye. No opposition, abstentions. Student rep's position? Motion carries 5-0-0. Student rep recorded in favor. Representatives of the panel, thank you so much for coming back to us this evening.
Thank you for your time.
We thank you for your continued support. Okay, the next item that comes on our agenda this evening deals with reconsideration of the warrant article for asbestos abatement at Merrimack High School. Marge, would you speak to that item, please?
Yes, thank you. As you know, we had a session with the Budget Committee on January 31st, and that evening it was to begin to go through and talk in terms of the warrant articles that we had prepared. When we got to the asbestos abatement warrant article at Merrimack High School, Joe Valite recommended that we take a look at the way the warrant article had been written, because he felt that when you looked at the map of the high school, the $150,000 proposal was really for the first phase of removing the asbestos. It wasn't the entire project. And he felt for the voter it would be a better intention to simply say that this was for executing the first phase of asbestos abatement. One of the things that we've learned with dealing with the Budget Committee over the past years is they look at these warrant articles for the first time, and sometimes they will say, you know, I don't know that this is as clear as it might be, or I think it would be better if the voter looked at it this way. I think it becomes more clear. And so it seemed after that conversation that it was a wise thing to bring this warrant article back to you to ask, would you still approve it if it had the insertion of the phrase executing the first phase of asbestos abatement? And if so, it would be important to do the reconsideration, take another vote, and then be able to take that back to the Budget Committee when it reconvenes tomorrow night and/or February 13th. And as I say, in the past, we've had the experience of, and it just so happened, it was Joe Valite who raised an issue before to say, I'm not sure this warrant article is as clear as it might be. And upon making the change, the board made the change, we took it back to the Budget Committee, it passed there, and in fact, the voters approved the particular warrant article. It has to do with maintenance emergency fund, capital reserve fund. So that's why this is before you this evening.
Jody?
Thank you, Marge. I attended the Budget Committee hearing, and I listened to the deliberations, and I personally don't have a problem with changing the wording. I could support this. It doesn't change the intent that was there originally by the school board, and if it helps to clarify the intention of the warrant article to the public, I'm all for that. Also mentioned in the deliberations by the Budget Committee was the message that it was confusing to have the warrant article for the capital, for the savings for future asbestos payment listed ahead of the high school, and I wondered if we were going to switch that around when we present it to the voters.
That really is something that we normally work on, the lineup, the placement, and I think the reason that we presented it to you and we're presenting it to the Budget Committee in that order is because it was 3 capital reserve funds all in a row. But when it was said and so on, it is then back to how does it appear to the voter? The voter is not thinking in terms of, oh, here are 3 capital reserve fund warrant articles all at once. And so if in fact it makes better sense, given that the content has to do with asbestos abatement, that is just a reordering.
Further comment or discussion? Jennifer?
Just a quick question. We didn't cover what is going to have to be done in the future. How much of the school needs to be pulled up? Flooring pulled up? Is it the rest of the school? Is this just, are we looking, what we looked at that day, that tour we took, is that just the worst of the entire school that needs to be replaced?
Yeah, that's the worst of the school. However, there's probably an equal amount of square footage in other parts of the building that needs to be done. So probably, looking at the maps, I don't have them here, but rough guess, it's probably like maybe half or 40% of what needs to be done in the school eventually. And it certainly doesn't make a big dent in the district-wide perspective also.
Thank you.
Further question or comment? Seeing none, I'd like to have a motion to move the modified asbestos abatement at Merrimack High School warrant article forward for approval to the Budget Committee to read, shall the district raise and appropriate the sum of $150,000 for the purpose of executing the first phase of asbestos abatement and flooring replacement at Merrimack High School, where majority vote is required. So made by Jennifer, second by Jody. Further comment or discussion? Seeing none, we'll put the question to a vote. All those in favor as approving the asbestos abatement at Merrimack High School warrant article as modified, so signify by saying aye. Aye. No abstentions or opposition. Student rep's position. In favor, motion carries 5-0-0. Thank you. The next item on our agenda this evening concerns the legislative efforts surrounding House Bill 46, the kindergarten operational aid. Rose, would you speak to the efforts that you've undertaken?
Yes. About 2 weeks ago, Marge Chaffrey and myself, along with Chris Christensen, who is the sponsor of this bill, we testified in front of the entire Finance Committee of the House of Reps, and we were all able to speak and had the opportunity to explain the history, a little bit of history behind the bill. And one of the pieces that's a little bit different from Merrimack than some of the other people that are included in the bill is at the time that Merrimack made their agreement with the state of New Hampshire concerning the kindergarten aid and this bridge funding, was that this was a fully operational program, and we were in the last portion of that program. However, as a result of the just the way that the budget's run and the budget sunsetting, and the course of the fact that it took us 2 years to actually do the building program, realign the district, and actually start kindergarten, the money for this bill had sunsetted. So we worked with our representatives, and Chris Christensen, and back 2 years ago, Marge and I worked with him through the process and went through all the different steps of going before the House Committee, Subcommittee, Senate Committee, subcommittees, and were able to secure our funding, and that was 2 years ago. And so then, since then, it was brought to our attention that because of the way that the average daily membership is figured, and the way it's cycled, and it has to do with the way that the Department of Ed cycles it and the way that the biennium budget happens at the state level, that we were still in a place where we still needed this bridge funding that was an agreement that we made with the state. So we were back to the table for that and working with Chris Christensen again. And it was further pointed out to us that in addition to the funding that we thought we only needed for 1 more year, because this is again a biennium budget, that we won't actually be realized into the full funding until the next biennium cycle. So we actually had double the amount at stake. And at the end of the day, last week at our conference or meeting that we spoke at, we the money, all of the money that we will need for the next 2 years was placed in this bill, and the other 2 towns that also were seeking this funding were also funded as well, just the 3 entities, and it was passed on and approved by the representatives of the Division II committee. It was a 5-1 vote, and they passed it on as ought to pass. So basically, their committee was stating to the next step in the process is that it is their desire that this ought to pass to the next step. So, anything else you'd like to add to that?
I think I would just add, so what that would mean, and we now have to not only continue to watch it go through the House, but then it will cross over to the Senate, and we'll have to go through the same process. If this were to be realized, this particular bill, for next year, we would receive $291,600 for our kindergarten students, which would be called kindergarten operational aid, and the following year would be $300,000. So this is $1,200 a pupil. It helps with the purchase of supplies, and it helps in funding the teachers for the program. And as Rose points out, it's called bridging money from the time that you begin your kindergarten process until the children become a part of your average daily membership. So it's significant for the towns right now of Merrimack, Hampstead, and Goffstown. We were all there. I think that made a tremendous difference for us to have a school board member, the 3 superintendents, the representatives from the 3 places. So we're very, very hopeful, and we'll just keep you informed as it comes out of the House and crosses over to the Senate.
Rose?
As we left the chambers that day, Representative Christensen did thank us again for making the time to be a part of this process. And he did say that, you know, it was his personal feeling that he felt like it was very important that we did make the effort to come forward and be a part of this process, that it did say a lot to the committee, that the superintendent and in addition to the Representative Christensen being there and a school board member, that it did impress upon them the importance of this money and to be able to speak to that. And so as a result of that, we will certainly continue to engage in the process as this bill goes through the legislature.
Jody?
I just wanted to thank Representative Christensen, Marge Chaffrey, and Rose Robertson-Smith for their continued hard work and effort in working toward obtaining this aid. Thank you.
I agree. Thanks, Jody. This also gives us more reason to be hopeful, too, as it moves through the legislature that Merrimack can see continued kindergarten operational aid and assistance in our revenues next year. Is there any further discussion or comment? Okay, seeing none. Rose, thank you so much for attending, and Marge, thank you for your presentation. The next item on our agenda is constituents' budget correspondence. You'll remember that I raised this point under new business 2 meetings ago, and have been hopeful that we can take the time to address some of the emails that cared to provide different suggestions or comments to the board about ways to avoid cost or consolidate services in the district. I've asked Matt at this point to speak to constituent input that dealt with transportation costs, and Rosemary Rung and Susan Lee both had concerns that dealt with transportation. Matt, would you speak to the areas in which the district has already considered transportation costs?
Absolutely. If you kind of go back to 2004, 2005, when we opened the new middle school, we had a 3-run system. Really, when you looked at that, some people liked it, some people hated it. Basically, the parents of the upper elementary school didn't care for it all that much. So we looked at how to get out of the 3-run system back to a 2-run system, even while adding the additional school. So when we looked at that, we went to the 2-run system, and we started looking at getting larger buses, larger capacity buses, so we could maintain the 2 to a seat kind of directive that the board gave us. That suggestion really was brought about by the Planning and Building Committee. We started putting that into practice. So every year since then, we've been getting rid of regular buses and adding larger buses. Now you look for the 07-08 budget, there's 26 regular buses and 12 larger buses right now. If you take the configuration we had in 2004, 2005, bring it forward to 2007, 2008, just as is, with none of those changes, we'd have to ask for an extra $100,000 in the 07-08 budget. So by moving towards less buses, adding larger buses in the fleet, we really kind of saved ourselves over the years, and I think it was kind of a positive step. As I said, if we had taken 04-05 and just brought it forward to 07-08, the same plan, without any modifications, we'd be looking for like another $100,000 in the budget for 07-08.
Okay. Matt, specifically, one of the ideas was raised, said another area to study would be in taking over transportation rather than contracting it. Why do we contract now versus owning it outright?
Well, we hear all the time that we should privatize our services. Transportation is one that we have privatized. We contract that out to Laidlaw Transportation. In order to get our own bus fleet, we'd have to buy 38, 40 buses. The large capital cost would be extremely prohibitive. And plus you have the problem with liability. Laidlaw carries their own liability for the bus fleet. We don't have to concern ourselves with that. You have a whole nother bargaining unit as far as labor goes to deal with. So there's a lot of pitfalls with owning your own transportation fleet. In addition, you have the maintenance. Where is that going to get done? This is nothing you can just go to the highway garage, drive a bus in, and have the highwaymen take a look at it and repair it for you. This is something that's really specialized. So I think in some instances it makes a lot of sense to do things in-house, and other things it makes sense to contract out, to subcontract. As far as transportation, I feel it made sense to subcontract this out and to privatize the service.
Matt, does Laidlaw provide health benefits to their employees, do you know?
Yes, they do. To what degree, I'm not certain.
Okay, so not only would there be another bargaining unit, but that would be a potential cost that would be associated with the bargaining.
Absolutely.
Any questions for Matt surrounding transportation? Okay. Matt, another piece of the equation here that was brought up discussed reducing the bus runs at the high school. We currently have the high school and the middle school on the same transit cycle. Why do we do that?
Because it's a town-wide pickup. It's kind of like the upper elementary school. It's a town-wide pickup, and you need X amount of buses to go all the distances between the high school, middle school, and the far reaches of town. So to reduce the high school runs, really when you have a bus stop, you have high school kids and middle school kids, so the bus is going there anyway. You just couldn't extract high school runs because they're really combined.
Would there be any benefit, or would still need to provide the same amount of buses by removing the high school kids from the equation?
You would probably still need the same amount of buses to do the run in the time needed to do your second run, which is your elementary and your upper elementary school. If you removed all the high school kids from the buses, you could probably save maybe 2 or 3 buses from your fleet. But then again, you'd have another 500 cars in your parking lot, or what to do with them. So that'd be another problem.
Okay, thank you. Is there any comment or discussion? Okay. Thank you, Matthew. A second item that I'd like to bring to the table this evening concerns the use of electronic textbooks. Pat McGrath raised a potential cost savings in the area of curriculum material and suggested replacing textbooks and other consumables by using an electronic format. Debbie, what's the state of our inquiry into that?
Electronic textbooks are available, but only when the regular text is purchased along with it. And we actually have this availability with some of our newer textbooks. The way it works is for each text that's published, or that's purchased, we can have a CD of that same book, and we can also have a password so that a student can access the online version of the textbook. But those online and electronic versions are not available unless the individual text is purchased at this time.
Debbie, is that only under new book adoption cycles?
That's right. The new texts are where those availabilities are, although I do know that there are some texts of some of the older, say, for instance, literature, that has been around for many, many years that's in the public domain, and people can access those texts at home. Of course, the page numbers wouldn't necessarily match what the teacher's using in school. But as far as anthology, science text, social studies text, that would only be with the newer texts at this point. And it would only be, again, if you purchase the individual title. I think it's a certain number of titles you have the availability of the online version.
I recall that when I was teaching in the district, we adopted a reading textbook from Glencoe about 4 years ago. That at the time was able to offer the online format and a password, as you mentioned, where parents could go on. Would we assume then that the other books that we adopted from that point forward would all have that similar availability? For example, our social studies texts, as we look to adopt those in the near future?
Yes, the social studies pilot that we're carrying out right now, they all have that availability. And the recent purchase of math texts at the high school in geometry and algebra, they have the electronic availability as well as at the middle school.
So while we wouldn't see, I mean, you still do need to adopt the textbooks to realize any savings. I would anticipate that the savings would be in the replacement of books as they became damaged or lost. Is that a true statement?
That's true, and in fact, with the social studies publishers who are really aiming to have us buy their texts, they've offered to have us have free replacements of the CDs if those are lost. Usually there's a cost to those, but right now the social studies publishers are telling us that they would provide free replacements. But you're absolutely right, it will cut down on the wear and tear on textbooks because the students won't be carrying them back and forth as they have in previous years. That's a good point.
Rose?
Just from a health standpoint, I know as my one of my daughters went through the system at one point in high school, just due to the different courses she was taking and the fact that she was bringing her books home every day. I remember she was experiencing some back pain, and we actually weighed her backpack, and it weighed over 50 pounds. And that's what she was carting back and forth every day. And having to carry it around every day because the high school is very big and very spread out, and depending on where your locker is, it's not always convenient to be able to go in, to your locker between classes. And so even at that point, some of the ways that you would deal with it were, using, maybe keeping your books at home, and if a classroom set was available, special accommodations. But I certainly see having the CDs available in the future as just a good health habit that will be better for our students. And so I hope that we're in a situation or that we choose materials that that's a possibility just for the health benefits.
Jennifer?
You mentioned that it was one CD for one hard copy of a book. Do you purchase the CD? Or is that just kind of thrown in there with the purchase of the text?
Nowadays, it's put in with the text. The cost of the texts are very high. For instance, some of the social studies texts, they're all right around $70 each, and along with that comes a CD and a password to access online.
Thank you.
Other comment or question? Right, thank you, Debbie. I'm going to ask you to cover one more topic for us tonight to round out a third. Two constituents had comments about potential cost savings by integrating curriculum to reduce staffing. And the comments were made by Lucy Watts and by Carol Lee Dalton. And their suggestions concerned reviewing the course offerings to determine if the course material could be integrated into other subject areas. An example that was given was with the computer classes at the middle school, and a suggestion was, for example, could health class material be integrated into science or PE or team meeting time?
Both computer and health have certain curriculum standards that the state requires. In fact, as far as health goes, the law clearly states that schools must adopt a time schedule that distributes instructional time among various learning areas, and those areas are listed, and health is one of them. Just to give a demonstration of what's involved with health, this is the health, whoops, very heavy, the health curriculum guidelines that the state asks us to cover. And in those curriculum guidelines, this is elementary up through high school, there are 9 content areas and 7 skills that must be covered. And there's also a very clear setup on how those go as far as systematic instruction in grades K through 12, a planned K through 12 curriculum, and also sound assessment practices. It's very well spelled out. I think it would be pretty difficult to integrate it along with other subject areas, especially when we think about what we're trying to do now in the areas of literacy and math instruction, providing a 90-minute literacy block and a good solid amount of time for math. I think it would be quite a challenge to do that, to cover everything the state requires. Also, of course, the high school graduation requirement that the state has is that every student must take a half credit in health in order to graduate. I'm not sure if that answers the concern.
So the state requires that we offer a half a credit. Is that in their sophomore year?
We do it in the sophomore year. I think it's a little open as to when that can happen, but here in Merrimack High School, it does happen in the sophomore year, with just a few exceptions for various reasons.
Okay, but that's our flexibility to place that. It's probably for planning purposes for the students as they create their pathway toward graduation.
That's right. I think it was done, number one, so that students could fit in the various electives that they want to take when they get a little older, and there's also sometimes a maturity factor as to not having the 9th grade student take it, but offering it in the 10th grade.
Okay. And Debbie, you mentioned that there are contact hour requirements, or there's a time requirement. Does that come from the state as well for contact in, say, health?
What it says now is that the school must figure out how the instructional time will be divided up, but with the new minimum standards that came in, there is some flexibility as to how that day can be broken out, with some opportunities for things such as extended learning opportunities. But the school district must demonstrate how they're covering the pieces that are in the curriculum guidelines.
Would we assume then the same is true for the other areas, not just for computer, but for music, for art, for PE, with those other specials, as we call them in the middle school? Would they see the same sort of requirements?
They would see the same kind of requirements. I'm not sure that they're spelled out quite as clearly as what has to happen in the area of health education and computer. Those are two that the state has really focused on, especially, I would say, the computer one with the new, what they call the ICT standards.
At the high school level, the minimum standards for graduation do require that the students take a PE wellness course. Is that accurate?
That's right. Credit? A half credit in health, and I can flip back and tell you exactly what's required in PE. Two credits in PE.
2 credits, okay. Thank you. Jody?
Is it 2 full credits or 2 half credits?
Excuse me, it's 2 credits have to be offered to the students, but for graduation, they must take 1 credit. So in some cases, the school has to offer a certain amount, and then the graduation requirements are sometimes somewhat lower than that. So students must do 1 credit to graduate, but the school has to offer 2 credits.
Are there further questions or clarification needed? Okay, thank you, Debbie. Brings us to the next item on our agenda this evening. Is there any correspondence to come before the board? Seeing none, are there any comments to come from the board? Jody?
I've got just 3 quick points I wanted to make this evening. Based on some discussions and items that have come before us as a board and through the budget process, the common theme with these 3 points is that I am hoping that we'll get through to people is that I really would like for discussion to be based on factual information, and I think it would benefit everyone if people would take the time to research, ask questions, make phone calls, do whatever they needed to do to make sure they had factual information when they present their argument or their discussion. One of the specific items that I'm speaking to is the athletic fee. I had requested, as well as the board, for public input, and we have had some public input and some comments and some emails, and that's terrific. That's great. I welcome it. There has been difference of opinions. We've had people supporting it, people opposing it for various reasons, and I also think that's great because I think debate on a topic is very healthy. But what's concerned me is some of the misinformation that's been presented. One item specifically that concerned me was information was being distributed that in discussions regarding the athletic fee, it was proposed by myself that the booster clubs would no longer have to present financial support in lieu of the athletic fee, and that was a topic that was never discussed at the board meeting, was never an issue that was never presented by myself, and I just want to make sure that people understand that that's misinformation, that's inaccurate. And again, if you have any questions regarding my position on the fee, by all means, don't hesitate to contact me. The other item with budget processes, I've been sitting in with our hearings and now with the budget committee hearings, and I've just got some concerns regarding some information, again, that I feel is inaccurate and possibly misleading that's been put out there. There's been some proposed cuts based on some inaccurate information. I want to really make sure that people understand the facts and take the time to get the information needed. There's also been mention made that the school board has basically not done their part in looking out for school children's best interests by proposing cuts to staff and teachers. And I would just like to remind people that the proposed cuts to teachers made by the school board were in fact mostly due to decrease in enrollment. Again, we had a classroom, I believe it was our 6th grade classroom, that next year, without one of the 6th grade teachers, the class size is going to remain exactly the same as it is this year. So again, I really don't feel that the school board has been irresponsible with their proposed cuts. I feel we've spent an awful lot of time analyzing the data and the possible ramifications. So I feel any cuts in staff proposed by the school board was done in good faith. And again, when you've got decrease in enrollments, to me it just makes sense to cut your staff accordingly. Also, there's been mention made about cuts to the AP courses. I wasn't on the school board last year, but from what I understand, some of the AP courses that were cut, again, was due to decrease in enrollment. There has been no proposed cuts to teachers at the high school level by the school board during this budgetary process. So without cuts to the teachers at the high school, the cuts, and in fact, would not be responsible for any AP courses not being offered next year. Again, I'm assuming that administration will do what they do every year, and that's look at enrollment, look at what we've got to offer, and make a decision on what they're going to offer academically based on that information, not based on the fact that the school board cut teachers at the high school. Finally, I was able to catch on television, there was an interview with one of our town council members recently that was aired on a local Nashua station, and there was a statement made that I have concern might mislead people into the intentions of the school board. The statement was made that this person found that it was comical that the school board has basically presented to the public that we have cut $500,000 from our budget when in fact our budget is higher this year than it was the previous year. Our proposed budget this year is higher than it was the current year. I personally don't recall anybody on the school board saying that we've cut our budget by $500,000. We have in fact cut positions. We have in fact cut staffs, we've cut assemblies, we've cut some supplies, but I don't recall this. I don't believe that it's the school board's intention, and if anybody's got that that inaccurate perception regarding our efforts here as a school board, again, I encourage you to contact somebody on the school board to ask questions because I don't recall anyone saying that our budget this year was $500. Our proposed budget for the coming year is $500 less. $500,000 less. So, common theme through all of this, when you're not able to come to a school board meeting, you're not able to watch us on television, sometimes information is not passed on as accurately as possible. If you have any questions about what you hear, feel free to contact anybody here on the school board. We're all approachable. We're all very willing to take phone calls and answer emails in order to try and prevent some of the misinformation and misleading statements that have been made in recent weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jody. Comment, George?
I'd like to offer a correction, and I have a question for what Jody said. I believe that it was me that made a motion to reinstate all the field trips and assemblies, and I believe the board unanimously supported that. The field trips?
Yes.
And assemblies?
Not assemblies, just field trips.
Field trips, okay. My fault then. I thought we did vote to do that as well. And I have a question. Who was the council member that made the statements? Dave McCrae. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any further comment from the board this evening? Seeing none, is there any new business to come before the board this evening? Seeing none, are there any committee reports? Jennifer, then Rose, and George.
I met with the Drug Advisory Council, and pretty much we spent the entire evening going over the survey that was proposed to us, and just taking a look at it. We actually got to see a copy of the survey, which was really nice for all of us. And anyway, we spent quite a bit of time just talking if this should even come before the school board. So that was pretty much our meeting in total.
Rose?
On January the 18th, I attended a conference with Marge and Debbie and Ken Johnson, Rick Walker, and one of the other, Mark Walzak. And the conference was held up in Concord, and it was called Heads Together 07 Dropout Prevention and Recovery Conference. And at this conference, the reason why we attended it was in anticipation of the possible new standards of, if it goes through the legislature, the new law of the dropout age going to 18. And so this was a very proactive step on our part. And I'm pleased to say that I think for the few things that are attended like this as a group by the school district, that this was a very good choice, because there were lots of breakout sessions, and as well as keynote speakers from different places in the country that had come. And I think we really got to hear a lot of good information. And the good news is as we did hear from some individuals who have had a lot of success in this area, I myself was able to sit and make notes and say, okay, we're doing this right, we're doing this right. And then I also saw lots of areas for how we can improve. And certainly areas where we need to assess where we're at, which of course is exactly part of our logic model, is to assess where we are at a certain place in time and be able to truly be honest about where these students are and be able to move them forward, and to move them forward in such a way that they can have the kind of success they need to have to lead productive lives. And one of the exciting pieces was, which I probably found one of the most interesting speakers, was an economist from Northeastern University. He talked in terms of the importance of education, and how that education is an investment as opposed to a commodity. And I can actually, which I think we should add to the next information that the school board all gets, is the context of going to the website and actually looking at the information from the Heads Up conference. They did tell us that they would put all that information online for us. It's a lot of information, but it's a lot of good information. And I think that it will be a nice guiding force in helping us to determine a plan and a program, in just regardless of whether this age 18 dropout goes in, because there was a lot of good information of where we need to go in the future with this group of individuals that are amongst us in our high schools. Anything else you'd like to add to that, Marge?
No.
Okay. George?
I attended the Parks and Rec committee meeting. The couple of, at length was discussed the fact that the director's position has now been reduced to a part-time position. There was a lot of discussion of revolving that. The majority of the committee felt that that position would not be best served in a part-time role. We have a couple of announcements. March 21st, there's going to be a bus trip to the flower show at the Expo Center in Massachusetts, Boston. And February 24th is our winter carnival. The theme for the carnival is a really good theme. A lot of the committee was happy about this. It's going to be all things French, in tribute to Norma French. March 31st, we have the Easter egg hunt coming up. And we're looking into May for possibly a duck tour.
Okay, thank you, George. Any other committee reports? I will submit, we were all invited to an event that was sponsored by the Josiah D. Bartlett Foundation that dealt with education funding in the state, and I was able to attend that and was in a room filled with a lot of legislators, a lot of board members, a lot of just concerned constituents. You'll recognize our attorney, Eugene Van Loan, served on a panel. The discussion for the morning dealt with largely the pros and cons of having a constitutional amendment that would address the statement that was rendered by the Supreme Court that dealt with the legislature's need to come up with a definition for adequate education, and among its three remaining tenets, to also devise a source or system for funding that requirement or that definition. I'd say that the room was mixed with its response, and would offer to the board any of the documentation that I brought back from the conference if you're interested in seeing what was discussed that day. Second item, on the 23rd, I believe it was, I was able to attend with both Marge and Debbie, Dr. Kim Boothroyd, our literacy coordinator for the district, as well as the language arts coordinators from all 6 of the buildings, with the exception of Trish Bolio, who was replaced by John Fabrizio at Mastrocola Elementary School. The focus for the event really brought to our attention the need, as a district in need of improvement, to readdress some of the practices